Thank you. Thank you very much for your warm welcome. Your Excellency, Mr. Didier Burkhalter, Foreign Minister of Switzerland, Excellencies, distinguished business CEOs, civil society leaders, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. C'est un grand honneur pour moi d'être ici. Merci de votre invitation et de votre soutien. Grüße miteinander. Es ist mir eine Ehre, hier zu sein. Danke für diese Einladung. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor, and I'm delighted to be back in Switzerland. And thank you for this very valuable opportunity for me to share my thoughts and United Nations ideas, how we can work together to implement sustainable development goals and how to make our planet Earth and environment sustainable. Switzerland is a dynamic UN member state, consistently promoting multilateral cooperation for the common good. It is an important United Nations hub and partner across the global agenda. The United Nations office in Geneva is the second largest United Nations headquarters, only next to United Nations headquarters in New York. And thank you for all your strong support for the United Nations, including very generous support for strategic heritage project, which we will make this very historic UN building as sustainable and environmentally hospitable. Switzerland is also the birthplace of international humanitarian law. I know you share my outrage at terrible violations around the world. I have strongly denounced these breaches of international humanitarian law, most recently in Syria, where I warned that starving the people as a weapon of war is a war crime. That is just the latest disturbing example. While we work to end impunity and heal traumatized societies, we are also responsible for addressing the root causes of these troubles. Ladies and gentlemen, last year was a momentous and historic in terms of gaining agreement on how to tackle these root causes because of that millions of people are suffering tragically. Switzerland played a very important key role in the development of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Its negotiators were active in promoting Goal 5, SDG 5, on the empowerment of women and girls, SDG 6 on access to water and sanitation, and SDG 16 on good governance. Those are just the three important goals on which Switzerland delegations has been most contributing on this. And I'd like to thank you for your strong support. I'm especially grateful to Foreign Minister Didier Burkhalter and his staff for engaging throughout this process. He has also shown valuable leadership on challenges to international peace and security, particularly welcome his mediating role in Ukraine as chairman of OSCE. And I thank you for your government's strong support for my special envoys for Syria and Yemen, where they have been holding negotiations. I sincerely hope that the negotiation among and between the parties, Syrian parties, will be held as soon as possible. One of your nationals, again, Assistant Secretary-General Thomas Gatz, who is here with us, was deeply involved in the process of shaping this inspiring and integrated vision of Sustainable Development Goals. I thank you again. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is a triumph for multilateralism at a critical time in human history. All countries, civil society, and interested groups collaborated effectively. They forged a transformative vision of the way forward all the people. While we are excited, grateful for the member states to the adoption of these Sustainable Development Goals, United Nations during many years have been reaching out to the world. At least we have contacted 8 million people, starting from young people, boys and girls, and group of vulnerable people, women, laborers, and government officials, media, artists. Through My World website, our question was that, what kind of a world do you want? Just tell us. And we've been receiving all active ideas from so many people. These goals are the reflections of those views from so many people around the world, all kinds of groups of people. We can now build on the remarkable results of the Millennium Development Goals, which we've been trying to achieve from 2000 to 2015. It was a historic vision. It improved a lot of human lives, but still not enough. That is why member states have agreed to have another 15-year vision targeting by 2030 to make this world much better, this planet Earth healthier and sustainable. These are a constant reminder of our deeper responsibilities during the political and economic crisis of the past 15 years. Now we go much further. If the MDGs were a pact between donors and recipients, the 2030 Agenda must become the basis of new social contracts. Governments made a universal promise to all the people, and citizens of the world can now demand that governments honor these promises. All states and all actors own this agenda, which aims to finally end tyranny of poverty. When the MDGs were carried out through the development system, the SDGs must become the object of a dialogue between the state and its people, between duty bearers and right holders, between those with resources and those in need. In the course of our discussions, particularly business communities and many civil societies were urging the governments, the United Nations, to provide a far-reaching visions. I think United Nations member states have now delivered. They have adopted and responded by adopting these Sustainable Development Goals with 17 goals. These 17 goals represent virtually all the aspects and spectrums of our life, including the environmental conditions of our planet Earth. Now, I'm urging the business communities and civil societies that you have to respond to the visions of the world leaders. The world leaders, of course, they have political responsibility to make sure that these are owned by each and every government through their national legislations, orders, and whatever administrative measures. Then without a strong support and contribution and engagement of civil society and business communities, this may not be implemented. There is a perception that these are the visions of the United Nations, these are the visions of the governments. Of course, it may be so, but each and every citizen can play a very important role. Therefore, I'm urging you to own these Sustainable Development Goals yourselves and make it yourself your own goals and work with the United Nations. Now, with the SDGs, they are enshrined in an international political consensus. This sets the stage to take our work to the next level. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the 2030 Agenda commits a leaving no one behind. The basic theme is that all 7 billion people, maybe by the end of 2030, there may be more than 8 billion people. Without any exception, that everybody should be able to live sustainably in a healthier way. This pledge resonates well here in Switzerland. The preamble of your constitution perfectly expresses this spirit by affirming that, I quote, "The strength of a people is measured by the well-being of its weakest member," unquote. The Switzerland government has already presented that far-reaching vision, and I thank you for all this vision. This applies to cantons in Switzerland, and it also applies to the most vulnerable in the international community. This applies not only to the least developed, fragile, and failed states, but also to struggling people in any society. Even in the most developed democracies, people still die from poverty, hunger, and hate crimes. Refugees escape atrocities only to face xenophobia by those who associate these crimes and victims with the very perpetrators they fled. Even where safety nets are in place, too many people fall through. Physical disability, sexual orientation, race, and other differences obscure our common humanity. The result leaves minorities of all kinds exposed to discrimination. All development efforts, national and international, must begin by identifying the most vulnerable and understanding how to empower them. This is a change in the old development paradigm that can bring change for those who have been marginalized for too long. Ladies and gentlemen, this job has never been more urgent. More people have fled their homes than at any time since the Second World War. We now have more than 60 million people who are displaced internally or who have fled their countries, becoming refugees. This is the largest ever since the Second World War. Humanitarian appeals are 5 times higher than a decade ago. When I started my job as a Secretary-General, we needed $3.8 billion for a year. Now we need more than $20 billion. This is 5 times. We have, as Minister just said, there are almost 40 countries where you have high-level, medium-level, or low-level crisis and violence. There are more than 125 million people who need immediate daily life-saving assistance. This makes the United Nations and member states' role very extremely constrained. At the same time, we are motivated and we are committed to help those people. Generous donors are doing their part, but we need a new push for global solidarity. That is why I'm convening the World Humanitarian Summit meeting on May 23rd and 24th in Istanbul, Turkey. This is the first ever when United Nations is going to hold this level World Humanitarian Summit meeting. This is an opportunity to reshape the international response to crisis by addressing root causes, including the divide between humanitarian and development aid. I have been appealing and urging, even warning, the many developed countries, particularly in European continent. I know that it's a serious challenges for most of the European countries. They have not earmarked any budget for refugees. The easier way for them would be to cut fundings earmarked for development aid to use for refugees. Then some countries are cutting 40% or 30%. I fully sympathize and understand the understandable situation, but this is not the zero-sum game, development aid and humanitarian aid. There must be an additional budget and money for those people. That's what I have been urging. Later this month, I will issue a report on my vision, on Agenda for Humanity. I report to the member states of the General Assembly. I hope all partners help make this summit a great success. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the only challenge greater than achieving agreement on the SDGs is carrying them out. It has been very difficult, sometimes very passionate, emotional, in the process of negotiation. Every single word, every single paragraph was the subject of intense negotiation. Now that it's over, even though it must have been challenged, greater challenge is for us to implement these agreements. Each and every government needs to show strong ownership by aligning policies, legislation, and resources in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. I commend Switzerland for starting its own efforts nationally and internationally. We need visionary political leadership that sees beyond the national borders. We need effective institutions that break silos. These 17 goals. They are universal, they are all integrated, they are all are indivisible. You cannot separate one from another. These were negotiated globally in 2 tracks. One track was climate change, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. They negotiated a long time, during the last 18 years, on goal number 13. And the rest of the 16 goals were negotiated at the General Assembly. Even though they were negotiated differently through 2 tracks, but they are one. They are one. Nothing can and should operate in separation. They are one part of our vision. The recent Paris Climate Change Agreement represents a first of many steps the international community will have to take to achieve the SDGs. There are many what we call cross-cutting issues, like food, water, energy, gender, and climate. Those are cross-cutting issues which affects all, particularly if number 13 goal, climate change, is not properly addressed, all the gains which we will make or we have made will be seriously undermined. Ladies and gentlemen, markets now have the clear signal they need to scale up investment that will generate low emissions, climate resilient development. The world leaders have given directions. We are going this direction. This is the sustainable path. So whatever decisions, investment, or infrastructure, or consumer goods, or whatever, should be better be aligned along this path, sustainable path. The solutions are increasingly affordable and available, and after the success of Paris, many more are poised to come. And we need a real partnership between business, the public sector, civil society, and government. A partnership based on equality, inclusion, and fair sharing of risks. One of the very valuable lessons which I have learned as a Secretary-General during the last 9 years is that without tripartite partnership among the governments, business communities, and civil society, nothing can be achieved. However, this vision may be good. Therefore, there should be a very strong tripartite partnership established. And I'm asking you to practice this one in implementing climate change and Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goal 17 calls for a revitalized global partnership or sustainable development. All have a role to play, but the richer countries have a responsibility to show greater solidarity. Of course, we welcome South cooperation, but there should be more from North to South cooperation. When North to South and South to South partnership and cooperation are integrated, we will have a greater gains. A revitalized global partnership means wealthy countries meeting the agreed commitment to allocate at least 0.7% of gross national income for official development assistance. And it means building on the framework for development financing agreed in Addis Ababa. This Addis Ababa Action Agenda, what we call AAAA, Addis Ababa Action Agenda, features a comprehensive set of policy actions with a package of more than 100 concrete measures that draw upon all sources of finance. This includes better management of national resources and strong cooperation in tax matters. In the face of multiple crises, development cooperation should not be diminished or diverted. That would be like burning your house down to stay warm. We need to protect those in crisis while strengthening their societies. We must move from delivering aid to ending need. Of course, when there is a need for humanitarian assistance, we have to deliver. But it would be much better if we don't have any reason to deliver aid. That means we have to address all the root causes of the problems. At the same time, we must address the grave threat that conflict poses to sustainable development and the entire 2030 agenda. The price of neglecting conflict prevention is plain to see. Widening sectarian tensions, shrinking democratic space in many places, and an arc of crisis stretching from the Sahel to the wider Middle East. One day of fighting, when a hospital is bombed, a bridge is destroyed, and hate becomes entrenched, causes damage that can take years and years to repair. The SDGs will promote peace, but peace is also essential for SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2030 agenda is visionary, and we have to build practical mechanisms to make it work. That requires accountability through solid follow-up, review, and a stronger emphasis on good data. The annual high-level political forum on sustainable development must become the dashboard for driving this process. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I'd like to make a special appeal to many business leaders present here, where we are working together with the government and civil society and implementing these sustainable development goals. I'd like to ask business CEOs to have a global vision in operating your enterprises. When the CEOs have an inclusive way of managing your companies will thrive. Try to give decent and affordable opportunities for young people so that these young people and women, so that these young women may not have sense of disillusionment against our society. When CEOs have a vision and strong commitment on human dignity and human rights, when your company is operated, whose human rights and dignity are all respected, I'm sure that your company will thrive, because these employees will be motivated, not only being grateful, motivated and committed to work not only for the benefit of their personal gains, but for the companies and for the societies. That becomes national gain. National gain will bring international gain. That's the way the United Nations is now trying to ask world leaders. Try to motivate your people rather than imposing something to do. When one is motivated, then it's a self-help. Then I think our countries and Switzerland and your company will thrive. Then in such a case, maybe United Nations will have lesser work to do. That's what I'm expecting as a Secretary-General. Switzerland is an important UN member state. Your country may be small in terms of population, in terms of size. But what I have been observing is that you have such a strong and very warm and big heart. You have a much greater vision, global vision than other people. That's why I love to be back and love to work with the Swiss people and government and inspire global visions. Look at what you can do beyond this Switzerland for other people around the world who are in need of our warm hands. And I count on this country to do even more as we advance to a new future. And ladies and gentlemen, let's work together to make this world much more peaceful, much more harmonious, and healthier, not only for us, but for our succeeding generation. And I thank you for your strong commitment and engagement. Thank you. Danke schön.